folks, and welcome to Aurora Play. My name is Jessie Marion Davis, and today we are looking at Meld by Benedict Mason. It's a world premiere performance which you can watch if you follow along the link at the end of this interview. And I am delighted to be joined today by Principal Double Bass at Aurora. This is Ben Griffiths. Ben, welcome. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Hi, morning Jessie.
Hi, I've got a question. It's quite a broad question really. There's so much for us to go into with this piece because it was written especially for Aurora and Chantal's choir. It uses the space in really amazing ways. I felt when I watched it 6 years ago in the Royal Albert Hall that it really suited Aurora. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience of performing this piece?
It was 6 years ago, which at the moment especially feels a bit like a lifetime ago for obvious reasons. But the main thing I remember is that we had this insanely complicated piece today, which involved, and I had to write down some things about it. We had, we can go into this later, but we had a click track, there was walking. All the bass players had two double basses because it was impossible to get from one place to the other in the Albert Hall with, carrying a double bass because it's so far. There were verbal cues, there were special instruments. And then the minor thing in the first half of the concert, we had to play Mozart 40 from memory, which was the first time the orchestra had ever done a memorized symphony. And as far as we know, as far as Nick and John knew, the first time that any orchestra had ever performed a memorized symphony anywhere in the world, ever. So, there was a lot to think about that day.
Yeah, quite a lot going on. And I know that Aurora is known for pushing boundaries, and I know also from talking to the players that you're often you're not necessarily coasting when you're with Aurora. Is a lot going on. So I guess this piece. I mean, the first thing I suppose to talk about is the use of space, and this piece was written specifically for you in the Royal Albert Hall. Watching the footage back, and it's an amazing film. I see that you're often up in the gods, is it, right at the top? And then there are moments where you emerge in the boxes. And tell us a bit about the use of space and movement in the piece.
It's one of those, so they say that playing in an orchestra is being a small part, being something greater than the sum of its parts. This was kind of the ultimate example of that because unless you were actually in the audience, there was literally no way of seeing the entire effect. So the use of space was extraordinary because from any different angle, you'd get sort of a completely different sort of snapshot of what the performance looked like. So all the basses, I think, were in one individual. I think we were in like royal boxes or sort of grand tier boxes, which was kind of nice. But so we were sort of like laid out as like sort of little tableau, like paintings almost across the Albert Hall. And then all the second violins were sort of in the upper circle, I think, in a massive row, in a huge arc, all the way around the Albert Hall. Yeah,
the thing that struck me as an audience member being in the middle of that at the time, it felt like the Royal Albert Hall had come to life. It was like, because we could see the movement of the players through the open doors in the boxes around the space and up in the gods, and it felt like sort of an army of ants on a leaf, or like it reminded me of like blood vessels, like you were filling it with life, and it sort of had like, it was really ordered and sort of so well thought out, but it also felt a little bit like irreverent and anarchistic, like the orchestra had sort of taken hold of the space and we just didn't know what was happening, and you could see it on the audience's faces. And I remember that feeling of like, this is really happening, oh my god. And then suddenly the brass players were doing stuff in the, like the horns were down in the promenade area, and there were, it was amazing. Ben, when you're working with a composer who has written a piece for you as an ensemble, I imagine that's quite exciting in terms of scope for sort of collaboration. To what extent was Benedict a part of the bringing together of the piece, and were there moments where things were changed and adapted to the space and what you were finding in rehearsals?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, yes, absolutely. It's it's always a real privilege if you've got the composer there and you're working with them and you can try and sort of adapt it, and maybe something in performance is not quite how they envisaged it in on computer or on paper, and a different sound or whatever. But in this case, that sort of got amplified out of all normal proportion. Especially during a festival like the Proms, there's a hugely limited amount of time you can actually get into the building to rehearse it, because obviously there are other Proms going on all around that thing. And for a piece like Meld, which was by definition site specific, we could only get in there, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times, and even that was really pushing it, just to see where we would be and just to see how this thing would actually work. I mentioned earlier about the Benedict Mason's original intention of having the double basses in these very seldom used choir stalls behind the organ, which turned out to be really, really dusty, and we literally couldn't fit. He was quite insistent that we go up there, and we sort of had to be quite firm about it, say, look, we're terribly sorry, but not only do we can't play up here, but also we're all gonna be sneezing all the way through the performance. So yeah, we ended up getting promoted to grand tier boxes, which was quite nice. So there was that, but I do remember it being tricky. There's one thing rehearsing it in Cecil Sharp House or something and walking around and going through the motions like that, but it's another thing to sort of actually, the Albert Hall is obviously a very large building. It takes a long time to walk from place to place. It's quite, we probably covered several, miles during the rehearsals and the performance itself. It was a performance quite like no other.
It's a real feat, I'm sure, like getting that piece together, so stretched out across this huge space as an orchestra. You can see earpieces. For people who have no experience of this, can you take us through how you stayed together as a band?
So for a normal, for a sort of commercial recording session, you'll have an earpiece, a headphone in your ear, and in that will be a click track, and it will simply be going like that, and you play on the 4th or the 5th or whatever, and it just makes sure that everyone's in sync and playing at exactly the same time. This had that, but kind of in spades. So you basically had clicks going through the whole time, and then you had a voice in your ear going ready, set, and play, and then you'd have to play exactly that moment. That was all kind of fine. That doesn't sound too complicated, apart from the fact that the programmer had to write 85 or something individual click tracks on a computer. This entire sort of thread, and they were all individual parts because everyone was playing at different times, which in itself was a massive headache. But then the really interesting thing about this piece in particular was, because the space is so huge, you've got a sound delay between one side of the hall and the other. Like if you play a note at the same side at the same time on the same different sides of the hall, it's going to be heard at different times because of sound takes time to travel. So we somehow had to reconcile the delay, on one hand the absolute precision of players playing exactly with the click, and the fact that there was a delay between two people hearing that at the same time, but the sound then being slightly out of sync, which was, a bit of a head scratcher. I'm
also thinking now about how you were performing Mozart's 40, the Symphony, from memory. Couldn't be more contrasting, I suppose, in the way that as a musician in this piece, in Meld, you're being called upon to kind of listen into this click track inside your ear, like really focus in, and you can see the sort of concentration of the players in this kind of mechanical cells in a way. And then we go to Mozart, where you're sort of embodying this piece and swaying and moving together in this kind of glorious, I guess I'm sort of getting at the fact that there are two wonderful examples of an orchestra kind of at its best, if I may say, like in this performance. Like, how was it for you to access that kind of the Meld headspace when you were also in Mozart land? Was that, I guess it's something you do all the time, but how was that?
The thing about the difference between the two pieces was that Meld had to be this incredibly precise, unbelievably intricately knitted together combination of, practically dance, movement, speech, singing, crazy instruments, loads of really tricky extended techniques, like loads of super high harmonics on the basses. You'll see that in the video, as well as listening to this click track, as well as trying to remember when your cue was supposed to come up, roughly how long it was going to be before the voice started speaking in your ear, literally. As well, at the same time, not being distracted by everything else that was going on in the hall, because it was so visually arresting. It was like sort of having, you know, all of your colleagues in these little cells opposite in the boxes, sort of delineated by the, you know, the lovely red curtains of the Albert Hall and the pillars and things, all looking sort of quite grand. I mean, we all look so young. My God, it was 6 years ago. But, you know, before that, we'd done the Mozart, which was completely different, and obviously it has to be precise and neat and tidy and everything else. But that was just us. That was just pure music, just the orchestra. And the challenge with, you know, all the memorized symphonies we've done is trying to sort of, you know, almost get rid of the music, get rid of the printed page, so that you only hear the performance and you only focus on, you know, the music coming out. The thing with Meld is that you had absolutely no idea what the final performance looked like. Like, I mean, when I watched the video, I'd never seen it before. It was only if you were in the audience. I mean, so when we're doing Mozart from memory, we're all incredibly, you know, intricately, intimately even connected to each other. We look across, we see each other. You know, we look out for different moments. This is like a special bassoon moment or a lovely viola moment, or we'll have a little, you know, smile at a particular bit we enjoy. With Meld, there was sort of obviously, you know, similar things in terms of concentration and focus and trying to get it really precise, and a lot of it memorized, because you couldn't look at these tiny little cue cards the whole time, but in a completely different way. But we had absolutely no idea of the end effect, whereas in Mozart, the end effect, we knew exactly what we were aiming for in the end effect, if you see what I mean.
So Aurora, I mean, you've been playing with Aurora, Ben, for many years now. To put you on the spot, what do you enjoy about this band? It's
been a hugely important part of my life for 15 years, and I got made principal bass in 2012 on my birthday, which was quite a nice birthday present, getting a call from John Hart, the chief exec. We've had an extraordinary 8 years, partly, you know, after this particular concert, after this particular prom, like the first Mozart memorized symphony, you know, things have really taken off in an even bigger way. But I mean, even before that, we were doing, you know, crazy things with orchestral theatre. We did loads of touring. I think in one 18-month period, we went to Shanghai, St. Petersburg and Melbourne Festival for a residency there, and then Brazil for the ABO conference over there, which was absolutely extraordinary. It means an awful lot. It's an incredibly powerful thing. It's a very joyous occasion every time we come together. It's been, you know, really painful the last 3 months, not being able to see your friends, not being able to make this fantastic music, and obviously in the Beethoven anniversary year, it's even sadder. But so it really, you know, that's what it means. It's a very personal thing. It's a deeply privileged thing to be a part of. I'm already gathering from this conversation today that and from all the interviews I've been making with the players that Aurora challenges and stimulates you as musicians because of the demands that it makes on you. Is that something that resonates with you? Of course. I mean, it's always, you know, whenever we get to the end of a project, especially, I mean, it's, you know, the memorized ones are the ones that people talk about, but I mean, there are, you know, masses of other things like the Insomnia Project, you know, a few years ago, where where the, you know, the powers that be behind it, Jane Mitchell and others, managed to conceive of this whole sort of arc of a performance, and that one sort of involved going from darkness into light, and in the middle, in the interval, we had this ligeti, this piece called Poème Symphonique for 100 metronomes, 100 analog metronomes, just ticking away like this, like, you know, like you're awake in the middle of the night, unable to sleep. And that eventually then melded out, for want of a better word, into an arrangement of Blackbird, the Paul McCartney song, in the very beginning thing. Like it was this fantastic sort of chaos, just going very gently, very subtly into this beautiful, beautiful Paul McCartney song. And then finishing with, what do we finish with? Britain Nocturne. So, and it was, you know, a really sort of powerful, like sort of, you know, sleep to like, oh God, total insomnia, can't sleep, and then eventually calming down at the other end. So that sort of thing, which is, you know, it takes a clever brain to do that. much more than I could ever come up with.
And bold programming, putting things alongside each other, might not often be placed together. But also I seem to remember from that performance that the audience had a role to play, as often is the case with a lot of Aurora gigs, where the audience members, some of them were invited to bring a metronome up and put on the stage. They were part of the performance, which I think I've witnessed happening a lot. And it's a very open and inviting orchestral space where I think your bond as players is not perceived as an exclusive club. It's opened up. It's a love for the music and for creativity, I think, and collaboration, which shines out.
Absolutely. Well, thanks. It's a really nice thing to say. I mean, we get a lot of repeat business. The players that we work with, there's the core of principal players, but I mean that's sort of that which is one thing, but the main thing is the fact is all the other players that keep wanting to come back and work with it and put themselves through the mill of memorizing Beethoven or Mozart or Brahms or Shostakovich or Berlioz. I mean, these are core repertoire pieces, which people look at. If you announce you're going to do Beethoven 5 from memory, people kind of go, "Really? You really going to do that?" And so they take that responsibility and they think, well, we can't mess this up. It has to be really, really good. It has to be really polished. You can't, mess around with that sort of thing because it's Beethoven.
You've been principal bass player with Aurora since 2012 on your birthday. That's a good amount of time to have accrued, I guess, some really memorable moments. If I pushed you now, I'm thinking of one, I'm sure you were involved in some kind of incredible circus performance at one point with your bass, maybe aloft in the air with your instrument. I seem to remember, maybe I'm imagining it. But could you, if I pushed you to hone in on a top memory for you, Ben, with Aurora, what would it be?
That one probably involves a bit of explanation. It was a collaboration with a group of circus performers in Snape Maltings. We did Les Illuminations by Britain. Basically, these guys were doing all sorts of incredible, trapeze artist work and rope work and ribbon work, and amazing, fit and muscly and incredibly happy people flying through the air at great speed and like proper heart and mouth stuff. And at one point, I kind of joked to we had to walk from one part of the stage to the other in Snape Maltings, and the gag was supposed to be that one of the circus performers was holding her sort of strap and saying, "Oh, would anybody like a go?" And we were all supposed to go, No, I don't want to do that. And I sort of called their bluff and went, "Yeah, all right, I'll do it." And she called my bluff and said, "Here you go." I thought, God, I've got to do this now. So I sort of grabbed this and she sort of showed me how to put it on. And I just remember Kate Green, the orchestra manager at the time, just going, and, probably thinking about insurance implications or something.
Incredible. So you have literally flown through the air.
I was airborne with a double bass. I don't think many people can say that. There are loads, to be honest. Brazil was amazing. Melbourne was amazing. We've been very lucky in terms of places we've been and opportunities we've had. But I guess I'd be kind of silly if I didn't mention the UK premiere of a double bass concerto, which I did with Aurora in 2019, last year, April 2019. By the American composer Missy Mazzoli, which was just amazing. A real treat to do a concerto. You don't often get to do a double bass concerto at all anyway. It's, I'd be lucky to do another one ever again, but to do one with your own orchestra is a sort of special kind of terrifying. But in the end, it was good, and it's a good piece. I hope we get to do it again.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's been so amazing talking to you. Thank you for sharing your memories and also your insight into this incredible performance of Meld that we've been focusing on today. And folks, you can follow the link at the end of this video to watch the film. And as we've mentioned, it's a very special film. GoPro cameras on the players themselves, as well as cameras spaced all around the hall. I would thoroughly recommend it. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again, Ben.
Thank you, Jessie. Bye.